host, Laura Sutherland. I hope you're all well and haven't missed me too much since the last episode. I was part of a senior leadership forum in the public relations industry last week for the Chartered Institute of Public Relations Wales group, and we were talking about reputation and if public relations focuses on reputation too much. And last week was also Get Chartered Week. I was hosting the panel and the discussion, and I thought it would be really interesting to break down the discussion that we had into three areas, which fits into chartership, which is leadership, strategy, and ethics. I suppose the first thing, Amanda Coleman, who is a crisis communication expert, was talking about reputation not being the centre focus in a crisis situation, because when you're in a crisis situation, you're trying to deal with the matter in hand, obtaining facts, being transparent, being authentic, and really sort of being human about everything. And her point was that if you were to put reputation first before all that, then actually you might be making decisions that you would otherwise make that were perhaps unethical. So that was pretty much from a reactive perspective. Obviously there is a proactive perspective where you're proactively looking at reputation. For example, I talked about mergers and acquisitions because having a high profile and having a positive reputation reflects better if you're about to be taken over or you are going to take over. Also from that perspective, there's, you have to think about the bottom line and the value that actually adds to your business. And then there's the personal reputation side of things where people are trying to profile themselves in business. They've got a personal brand. Obviously, reputation is going to be something that is front and foremost because reputation is what allows people to get to know you, get to trust you, and properly build relationships with you. But I think, we can't always be the advisor. And I think that's something to point out that sometimes we forget when we're in senior positions, because some organisations simply just don't invest enough in the role of communication to have that sort of focus. So we can't always assume that every organisation A has the resource in place, or B afford a resource at that sort of level where you're strategically thinking about reputation in a proactive manner. But as I say, since it was Get Chartered Week last week, I have segmented the conversation into three different elements: leadership, strategy, and ethics. I'm just going to run through, because I don't want this to be a big long podcast. I quite like doing shorter ones so that you can get bite-sized information, have a think about it, and then move on and either learn more yourself or formalise some thinking. So leadership, put people at the heart of everything. Lead by living the organisational values. So absolutely, leadership has to live those values. If leadership is not living those values, which so many leaders don't, then why on earth should other people? Why should there be a good culture? Why should those values come through inside and externally? Why should other suppliers, clients, customers, whatever, why should those people even bother with your values if you are not leading by living those values? And as Amanda said about in crisis communication, empathy, humanity, and authenticity, three things that are, that should, I think, should be applied to everybody, not just leadership, but more so important in leadership to lead that by example. And then something we talk about just now in the work I'm doing with the PRC's Misinformation and Climate Strategy Group is action over intent. It's all very well having intent, and it's all very well stipulating that you have intent, but what actually leads to change or something happening is action. And one thing that we in our industry really often struggle with is actually challenging leaders and challenging the why. So when you're being asked to do something, or when you're being told about a decision that's been made, as a strategic advisor, it is our role to challenge if we feel that there's a better solution or a better route, or that actually what's going to be happening is either unethical or will have some sort of detrimental impact on reputation. So challenging leaders is part of our role, and it's actually a skill that people will learn over time through experience dealing with different situations and with different people. But with that also comes the necessity to be able to listen and to be able to rationalize and to be able to have influence, and also to some extent I'm not saying debate or argue, but there will be a point where you will have to stand up and you will have to kind of come across as a very strong thought leader on what should actually be happening. So that is really important, and it's something that our industry does shy away from a lot. Especially in agencies, they just tend to take the money from the client and do what the client asks, which isn't necessarily always the right thing to do. And in organisations, people just want to get their head down sometimes, do a good job. That's absolutely fine, and understand that and respect that. But if we're to be the strategic advisor, if we're to have the best outcomes, if we're to do our job to the best of our abilities, then sometimes we have to challenge leadership. And in terms of leadership itself, like, what learnings do leaders have from situations, and then what do they do to put them into action? So, we come across situations in our businesses and organisations all the time, but it's important that we learn and reflect on that and then actually do something as a result. So don't make the same mistake again, for example. Or if if as a leader you have been challenged and you have changed your mind and you have done something different, learn from that and try and apply that same thinking to another situation in the future. And as people that work in internal communication know, what happens in the inside of organisations also should reflect on the outside of organisations. So that means that even in negative situations, inside will reflect potentially in the outside. So leaders have to be very aware that internally they have to have their internal stakeholders on site. They have to be working with them, they have to be engaging with them, and they have to have a really good culture so that reflects on the outside as well. Next, on to strategy. So from a leadership perspective and from reputation, strategy should always be built on data. And I don't mean data as in numbers that you've pulled from a spreadsheet. I mean research. I mean looking and gathering as much information as you can from as many areas as you can to build the strategy and data, because then it's actually founded in something that has been informed. But also you can use that as part of your benchmarking and as part of your measurement and evaluation. Every stakeholder group is different, so you will probably have also a different strategy for each of the stakeholder groups. You can't tarnish them all with the same brush, as I like to say. It's not broad brush strokes. It's basically, you have to look at those individual stakeholder groups and their needs, and then develop a strategy accordingly, because it might be different channels, it will be different solutions to different challenges, and that is the way that we should be looking at these things, not one size fits all. And then it comes to risks and scenario planning. Like, strategy really has to have those risks and scenario planning built into that, because if you haven't done risk assessments and scenario planning, you're not ready for the eventualities of what might happen. And that is something that we need to, as leaders in public relations and communication, we should be absolutely sort of looking at from a business continuity perspective, but also crisis communication, crisis planning. Not everything has to be negative. There could be positive situations that come out of your scenario planning, and that's great, but we have to recognise those things up front so we can build that into the strategy. And as I've mentioned, continuity already. And then looking at what other disciplines should public relations be working with on reputation, because reputation is not the sole responsibility of public relations. Reputation is everybody's responsibility. And so if you look at an organisation and look at not just the entire workforce, but if you split them down into departments or directorates, you're looking at everything from corporate affairs to finance to human resources to legal to all these different departments that help make up the entire organisation. And it's really important that we must consider all them from the outset. And then on to ethics. So we've got decision making, which is again something else we came back to in the conversation at the Senior Practitioners Forum last week, around actions and words. And in my opinion, it should always come back to those values and those ethics that your organisation has, and but most importantly that your leadership has, because again that's setting those standards, setting the precedents for what people should expect from that organisation. And then again, influencing for the right reasons. Ethically, yes, you can influence people for whatever you want, but ethically you should be influencing people for the right reasons, for the right outcomes, and not for your own self-interest. And sometimes, if you look at sport, for example, that is, I suppose, an area of debate where, and I don't want to get into debate, but it's an area of debate where decisions are being made where it's not necessarily for the right reasons, and it's more for financial gain than it is for anything else. And whilst obviously every business has to make money and wants to grow its profit and its turnover, it really has to be doing things for the right reasons, because otherwise you'll be found out and actually things will be reversed from a reputational perspective. And if your reputation is that you're not looking after your people, that you're making decisions based on purely profit or purely on something else, then that's actually not going to come across well to the rest of the team or the entire workforce. So it's really important when we're influencing, we need to assess what we're influencing for. Why are we doing it? What do we want that outcome to be? And is that for the right reason? So that's a snapshot of the conversation we had last week at the Senior Practitioners Forum, organised by CIPR Wales and the fabulous John Wilkinson. John, thank you so much for asking me to chair that panel event. I think it's going to be available as a podcast for the whole discussion, and I think it's also going to be available for rewatching essentially. So watch out for that on the CIPR channels. Also, just wanted to let you know that I am currently working on something pretty exciting, and hopefully we'll have more information for you soon. And it's all about sustainable business. It's about being a responsible business, and it brings all the strands of everything I've been working across the last 10 years together around stakeholders, sustainability, strategy, and really, it's quite exciting because it's a massive focus for so many organisations, but they're not doing it well. Some don't know where to start, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit more once I've formalised it all. So do tune in again to the People by People podcast. Also, please do share if you find the content valuable. Please do subscribe so that I go right into your streaming app, and also I can provide you with inspiration on a more regular basis. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.